I was standing in the middle of the living room of the house everyone called my consolation prize. Dust floated in the morning sunlight, thick and golden, like the air itself was holding its breath. My fingers brushed against the cracked wallpaper, and a thin curl of plaster came loose, landing on my silk blouse. My brother, Nathan, had sent me another photo of his condo's rooftop pool just minutes earlier, his idea of a friendly reminder of who'd won Grandma's inheritance. I forced a smile, even though no one was here to see it. That's something you learn as a woman, I suppose. How to smile when the sting is sharpest, when pride is the only shield you've got. The house smelled faintly of cedar and mildew, like time itself had seeped into the walls. It was old, stubborn, unwanted. Just like me, at least in my family's eyes. Then my phone buzzed again. Nathan's message. Hope the place isn't falling apart already. Should have fought harder in the will, sis. I laughed under my breath, the sound brittle in the empty room. My heels clicked across the floor as I walked toward the far wall, tracing the faded trim. Something hollow echoed back beneath my palm. I froze. Knocked again. Hollow. It was nothing, probably. But in that second, the bitterness I'd carried for years twisted into something else. Curiosity. Maybe even defiance. Because if Nathan thought this house was worthless, maybe he didn't know what Grandma had really left me. The memory of that day at the attorney's office is stitched into me like an old scar, tender when pressed, but always there. I remember sitting across the long oak table, my hands folded tightly in my lap. Nathan leaned back in his chair, his Rolex glinting under the fluorescent lights, his smirk already carved into place, as if he knew the outcome before the words were even read. The attorney cleared his throat. Nathaniel Miller inherits the downtown condominium valued at $480,000. Nathan's grin spread wide, and a ripple of approval moved across the room, an aunt nodding and uncle whispering, "Of course." Then came my name. Claire Miller inherits the Miller family residence on Hawthorne Street. The pause that followed wasn't silence, it was judgment. I felt it pressing against my skin like heat. The house was spoken of as a relic, a decaying thing no one wanted. Someone actually coughed, as though the decision itself was dust in their throat. Nathan shot me a sideways glance. "Guess you always liked old stuff anyway, Claire." His tone was sweetened with mockery, the kind you couldn't challenge without looking weak. I forced my lips into what I hoped passed for gratitude. My hands trembled so badly, I pressed them flat against my skirt to steady them. Behind my ribs, my heart hammered with humiliation. But then I heard Grandma's voice in memory, soft, raspy, from the last afternoon I spent with her. She'd squeezed my hand and whispered, "This house holds more than it shows, Claire. Don't let anyone tell you it isn't worth something. You'll see." At the time, I thought it was just a kindness to soothe me. A grandmother's way of softening the blow she must have known was coming. Still, her words planted themselves deep inside me. So when the meeting ended and Nathan strutted out already talking about furniture deliveries and wine racks, I made my choice. I walked straight to the keys laid out on the attorney's desk, picked them up, and slipped them into my purse. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to fight for what they thought mattered. I'd take the old house, the peeling paint, the leaking roof, and make it mine. The sting in my chest that day was sharp, but so was the quiet defiance that came with it. I didn't know yet what Grandma meant. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let Nathan's smirk be the final word on my life. The first year in the Hawthorne Street house nearly broke me. The roof leaked every time it rained, the plumbing groaned like an old man, and the furnace coughed out its last breath during one of the coldest winters I'd ever lived through. I patched what I could, learned to wield a wrench and a paintbrush, and spent more nights than I cared to admit wrapped in blankets, wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. Still, there was something about the house. Its bones were solid, its rooms filled with echoes of laughter and footsteps from generations past. When I walked its creaky hallways, I could almost hear Grandma humming in the kitchen, as if she'd never really left. Money was tight. I picked up freelance design projects, small jobs at first, logos for local businesses, a website banner here and there. I worked late into the night, fueled by coffee and stubbornness. Some clients paid late, some not at all, but every small check felt like a step toward independence. It was during one of those long nights, when exhaustion had my eyes burning, that I met Evelyn. She was a historian who ran a local preservation society, and she'd come across my name through a neighborhood project. When she visited the house, her gaze lit up like she'd stepped into a treasure chest. "You don't realize what you've got here, Claire," she said, running her hand along the carved banister. "This house isn't just old. It's history. And history has value." Her words hit me like Grandma's had. Value. Legacy. More than it showed. Evelyn became my mentor in ways she never intended. She taught me how to research property records, how to look for architectural details that told stories, how to respect the craftsmanship hidden under years of neglect. She even helped me land my first real restoration project outside my own house, reworking a Victorian townhouse that brought in more income than I'd ever dreamed of. The work was grueling. I scraped wallpaper until my hands blistered, spent weekends sanding floors until my arms ached. There were nights I doubted myself so deeply I cried into my pillow, certain Nathan was right, that I'd settled for less, that I was doomed to live small. But then came the victories. My first client who cried with joy at her restored dining room. My first project that turned a profit big enough to pay off a credit card. The first article Evelyn helped publish about my work, calling me a young woman reviving forgotten spaces. And all the while, I kept my successes quiet. On social media, I posted modest updates. A photo of my cat in the window, a sunset over the backyard. Nothing flashy, nothing that would give away how much I was building. My family assumed I was scraping by, just barely keeping the lights on. I let them. Because deep down, a part of me knew, the less they expected, the greater the surprise would be when they finally saw what I'd become. It was Nathan who suggested the family drop by one Saturday afternoon. His tone on the phone was dripping with false concern. "We just want to check in, Claire. Make sure the old place hasn't collapsed on you yet." I could hear the laughter in the background. My aunt, maybe my cousin. They all still thought of me as the girl with the shabby house, the one who'd drawn the short straw in Grandma's will. I told them yes. Not because I wanted their company, but because I was ready. When the day came, I stood in the foyer of the Hawthorne Street house, the same foyer that once smelled of mildew and despair. Now it gleamed. The wood floors shone with polish, the chandelier-eyed restored glowed with soft amber light, and sunlight poured through spotless windows onto freshly painted walls. Every inch whispered of care, of hours spent, of battles fought and won. The doorbell rang. Nathan strolled in first, sunglasses perched on his head, his designer sneakers squeaking against the floor. He stopped mid-step, his mouth parting just slightly. Behind him, my aunt and cousin followed, their eyes sweeping the space like they'd accidentally walked into a magazine spread. "Claire," Nathan's voice wavered, just a fraction. This looks different." I smiled, calm, almost amused. "Yes, I suppose it does." I guided them through the house, room by room, letting the silence stretch as they took in the crown molding, the curated artwork, the antique furnishings I'd salvaged and restored. I could feel their eyes on me, weighing, reevaluating. But I saved the best for last. At the far end of the library, what they thought was just a cozy room with shelves and a fireplace, stood the wall I'd once tapped and found hollow. With Evelyn's help, I'd uncovered a hidden door, sealed behind plaster decades ago. Beyond it lay the secret Grandma must have known about, a second chamber-lined floor to ceiling with books, journals, and manuscripts, some dating back hundreds of years. There were rare editions, signed works, even original letters from authors long gone. When I swung open the hidden panel, the air in the room shifted. Nathan stepped forward, his smirk long gone, replaced by disbelief. He ran a hand along the spines of the books, as if touching them might make them less real. What is all this?" he breathed. "Grandma's legacy," I said softly. "A private collection appraised at over $5 million. The words landed like stones dropped into still water. My aunt gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My cousin muttered something under her breath. Nathan just stood there, silent, his face pale. I let the silence hang, savoring the shift in power. For years, they'd pitted me, mocked me, written me off as the sister who settled for scraps. Now they stood in my house, in awe of what I had uncovered and built. Finally, Nathan found his voice. You knew about this? I shook my head.
No.
Not at first. But I believed Grandma when she told me this house was worth more than it seemed. I listened when no one else did. He blinked, as though the ground beneath him had tilted. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small under his gaze. I felt tall.
Solid.
Entirely my own. I turned, sweeping my hand toward the room. Welcome to my home. And my inheritance. Nathan was the first to break the silence. He let out a low whistle and shook his head, the arrogance in his eyes replaced by something I'd rarely seen in him, uncertainty. So, what now? He asked, gesturing at the shelves. You're just going to sit on all this? I folded my arms, leaning casually against the doorframe. That depends. These books aren't just valuable, they're fragile, historic. They need to be preserved, studied, respected. Not flaunted or flipped like condos. His jaw tightened at the word condos. My aunt shifted uncomfortably. Claire, darling, you know your grandmother would have wanted the family to share in this. We could, I don't know, set up something. Together. I smiled, warm but firm. Yes, she would have wanted us to share. But sharing requires respect. And truthfully, I haven't seen much of that from this family. Nathan bristled. That's not fair. Isn't it? I said evenly. When the will was read, you mocked me. You all did. You decided the condo was the prize, and this house was the punishment. But I took it. I worked for it. I believed in it when none of you did. Their silence told me they remembered every word, every smirk. I took a deep breath, steadying my voice. I'm willing to let you be part of this legacy. But there are conditions. Nathan frowned. Conditions? Yes. I stepped forward, meeting each pair of eyes. For you, Nathan, you don't get to treat this like a trophy. If you want a role here, you'll contribute to the preservation. You'll take classes, learn what these works mean, and prove you care about more than your image. He opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. If you can't, then stay out. I'd rather do this with strangers who respect history than with a brother who doesn't. I turned to my aunt. And you love to gossip, to tear people down when they're not in the room. If you want to be involved, that stops. You can help by volunteering, by fundraising, by lifting this project instead of dragging people through the mud. Her cheeks flushed crimson, but she nodded stiffly. Finally, I looked at my cousin. You're young. You've got dreams I know you've shelved because this family convinced you they weren't practical. If you want to be part of this, I want to see you chase those dreams, study, write, build something that's yours. Don't let their voices drown out your own. The room was thick with tension, but also with possibility. For once, they were listening, not dismissing, not laughing. My voice softened. I don't want revenge. I want respect. And I want us to build something worthy of Grandma's name. But that only happens if we stop repeating the old patterns. Nathan looked down at the polished wood floor, his hands tightening into fists, then loosening. My aunt shifted again, eyes darting to the shelves as though the books themselves were judging her. My cousin met my gaze with something I hadn't expected. Hope. The power had shifted. I wasn't asking anymore. I was deciding. And for the first time in my life, they knew it. The weeks that followed surprised me more than the discovery of the library itself. Nathan started showing up on Saturdays, not in designer sneakers and smug smiles, but in worn jeans and a plain t-shirt. He stumbled through his first preservation class, fumbling with gloves and archival tape, but he kept at it. For the first time, I saw him stripped of entitlement, unsure but willing. My aunt began volunteering at the local historical society, bringing cookies to meetings instead of gossip. She still slipped now and then, but when she caught herself, she flushed and changed the subject. That was new. And my cousin, sweet Emily, applied to a graduate program in literature she'd once dismissed as silly. The day she got her acceptance letter, she cried in the library, clutching it to her chest. I held her hand and whispered, "Don't let anyone dim this. Not ever." Watching them shift wasn't about me winning. It was about breaking the cycle I'd grown up in. The constant comparisons, the quiet cruelties, the hierarchy that left me feeling less than. Late one evening, after everyone had gone home, I sat in the hidden library with the lights low. The air smelled of old paper and polished wood. I pulled out a book Grandma had once read to me when I was little, her voice soft and steady in the night. Her words came back, as clear as if she were in the room. "This house holds more than it shows, Claire. Don't let anyone tell you it isn't worth something. You'll see." And I had. I closed the book and let my hand rest on its cover, a smile spreading across my face. This wasn't just about rare manuscripts or money. It was about legacy, resilience, and the kind of worth no one else could define for me. I thought of Nathan's smirk the day of the will reading, of my trembling hands and forced smile. And then I thought of the look on his face when the hidden door opened, when his certainty crumbled into awe. The contrast was everything. I leaned back in the chair, the silence of the library wrapping around me like a warm shawl. For the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. Because the truth was simple. My brother got a condo. I got a legacy. And in the end, I inherited more than wealth. I inherited strength, independence, and the courage to write my own story.